If you fix this truck that no one could, I'll quit. But what the new guy did. The voice echoed through the yard of St. Christopher's garage like thunder on a sunny day. Tyler Bennett stopped wiping his hands on the rag and looked up, feeling the weight of everyone's stares on him. He was only 22 years old and had only worked there for a week, but he already knew his life was about to change forever. Richard Henderson, the shop manager for 15 years, was pointing his finger at the red truck that occupied the back of the yard like a ghost. The vehicle had been there for 8 months, gathering dust and shame. 5 experienced mechanics had already tried to fix it. 5 failures. 5 public humiliations that Richard made sure to bring up whenever he wanted to discourage an overconfident employee. Silence spread among the men gathered on that hot March afternoon in Charlotte. Tyler could feel sweat running down his back, but it wasn't just because of the heat. The proposal he had just heard sounded impossible, absurd, and at the same time irresistible. This was the moment that would define not only his job, but his entire career. At 22, Tyler carried the burden of supporting his widowed mother and younger sister who was studying nursing. Losing that job meant going back to uncertain gigs, sleepless nights looking for work, the constant feeling of disappointing those he loved most. But there was something in Richard's look that bothered him. It wasn't just arrogance. There was a tension there, an urgency that didn't match the apparent confidence, as if the manager was more desperate for Tyler to fail than actually convinced that he would fail. "So, kid?" Richard crossed his arms over his chest, his dark blue suit contrasting with the green uniforms of the other employees. "Are you going to accept or admit you talked too much in the interview?" Tyler didn't remember talking too much in any interview. In fact, he had barely spoken. He answered technical questions with precision, demonstrated knowledge about engines and hydraulic systems, but never bragged about anything. He had been hired because his references were impeccable and because the shop was desperate for qualified employees. So why was Richard acting as if Tyler had declared himself the best mechanic in the state? "I accept," said Tyler, surprising himself with the firmness of his own voice. A murmur spread among the spectators. Some shook their heads, others smiled with pity. Walter Thompson, the oldest mechanic in the shop, with his 63 years and completely white hair, stepped forward. "Kid, you don't understand. This truck—" Walter paused, looking at the vehicle as if it were a sleeping beast. "This truck defeated Big Mike, who has 20 years of experience, defeated Derek, who is a diesel specialist, defeated even Brandon, who worked at the Autocorp factory." "And defeated me too," Walter admitted, lowering his voice. "3 times. Tyler nodded respectfully. He knew Walter's reputation. The man was a legend in town, capable of resurrecting engines that others would give up on, if even he had failed. "What's the deadline?" asked Tyler. Richard smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who believes they are about to witness an execution. 1 week, 7 business days. If by next Friday this truck isn't working perfectly, you're fired. And Richard made a theatrical pause. "I'll quit on the spot." "Wait a minute," intervened Sharon, the administrative manager, a 50-year-old woman who knew every bolt in that shop. "Richard, are you sure about this? Mr. Harold won't like losing you over some silly bet." Richard stared at Sharon with a coldness that made Tyler wonder if there was more to this whole story. "It's not a silly bet, Sharon. It's a matter of principles. This kid came in here thinking he'd revolutionize everything, that the old methods are no good. So let's see if he can do what men with decades of experience couldn't." Tyler was confused. When exactly had he given the impression that he found the old methods inadequate? In his first weeks on the job, he had just observed, learned, and followed instructions. He never questioned anything or suggested changes. "I never said that." "You don't need to say it, kid. It's written all over your face. That youthful arrogance. You all think because you went to technical school, you know more than those who learned through hard work and struggle." Now Tyler understood. It wasn't specifically about him. Richard was fighting something bigger, against the passage of time, against changes, against the feeling of being replaced by a generation he neither understood nor respected. But that didn't make the situation any less dangerous. Tyler needed that job. He needed to prove his worth. And no matter how unfair Richard's characterization of him was, the opportunity was there. It might be the only one he'd get. "I accept the conditions," Tyler repeated, "but I want full access to the truck. No restricted hours, no one watching my every move." "Done," Richard agreed too quickly. "You can work whenever you want, however you want. Just don't complain later that no one warned you." As the other employees dispersed, returning to their duties, Tyler approached the red truck. It was a model from the 90s, a Freightliner M2106, sturdy and reliable when well maintained. But this specific specimen had something unsettling about it. The paint was perfect, without scratches or signs of heavy use. The interior was clean and organized. It didn't look like a vehicle that had faced serious mechanical problems. Tyler opened the hood and leaned over the engine. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but there was a strange feeling, as if someone had been tinkering there recently. Some parts were positioned slightly incorrectly, nothing glaring, but enough to catch the attention of someone who knew what to look for. "It's strange, isn't it?" Tyler turned and found Walter Thompson beside him. The older mechanic held a coffee in an enamel mug and observed the engine with a thoughtful expression. "What's strange?" "This truck. It belongs to Dr. Henry Caldwell, the owner of the private clinic downtown. A serious man, demanding, but always fair with us. He brought the truck here for the first time 2 years ago, and since then, all the fleet maintenance work for his vehicles is done here." Walter took a sip of his coffee before continuing. "The problem is, this truck never had any issues before. It was one of the most reliable in the fleet. Until one day, out of nowhere, it stopped working. Dr. Henry was using it to transport medical equipment to a town in the countryside. The truck broke down in the middle of the road, without explanation." "What was the symptom?" "The engine would die suddenly, without any warning signs. They'd try to start it again and nothing. As if there was some electrical problem, but all the systems seemed normal." Tyler nodded, processing the information. Intermittent problems were the hardest to diagnose, especially when there was no apparent pattern. "Big Mike was the first to try," Walter continued. "He spent 2 weeks on it, replaced the fuel pump, the filters, checked the entire injection system. When he tested it, the truck ran perfectly for 3 days. We thought the problem was solved, but it wasn't. On the 4th day, the same problem. The engine died at the worst possible time. Dr. Henry Caldwell was transporting a high-risk pregnant patient to a maternity hospital in New York. Luckily, he managed to pull over at a station and call for another transport, but the situation was very tense." Tyler Bennett felt a knot in his stomach. It wasn't just a mechanical issue. Human lives were involved. "Then it was Derek's turn," Walter Thompson continued. "He suspected the problem was in the electronic system. He spent a whole month here, checked every wire, every connection, tested all the sensors. The truck worked perfectly during the tests. And then it stopped again, a week later. This time it was transporting medications to a hospital in the countryside, medications that needed to be kept refrigerated. The truck stopped and waited 5 hours for a tow truck. They lost the entire load." The story was getting more concerning. Tyler was beginning to understand why Richard Henderson was so tense. It wasn't just about professional pride. The garage's reputation was on the line. "Brandon tried a different approach," Walter Thompson went on. "He thought the problem might be in the chassis, some vibration or flex causing a bad connection somewhere. He practically took the whole truck apart and found nothing. He found several small things, loose bolts here and there, some oxidized connections, dried out rubber parts. He replaced everything, left the truck like new. It worked for a whole month without a problem." Tyler was starting to see the pattern. The truck worked fine during tests and for some time after repairs, but always ended up with the same mysterious problem. What was the last attempt? Walter Thompson took a deep breath before answering. "Mine. I was convinced the problem was in the fuel tank. Maybe some kind of contamination that only showed up under certain conditions. I drained the whole system, cleaned the tank, replaced all the lines. It worked perfectly during the tests. But 2 weeks later, the same problem. Dr. Henry Caldwell was taking his own mother to an appointment in New York. The lady is 87 years old and has heart problems. The truck stopped on Interstate 85 in the middle of heavy traffic. It was a nightmare." Tyler could imagine the situation. An elderly woman with heart problems stuck in traffic on a busy highway, not knowing if she'd reach her destination in time. It was exactly the kind of situation that could have serious consequences. That's when Dr. Henry Caldwell lost his patience, Walter concluded. He said he'd cancel all contracts with the garage if we didn't solve the problem once and for all. And Richard isn't handling the pressure well. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're just getting started. Now back to the story. Now Tyler understood Richard's hostile attitude better. The manager wasn't just trying to humiliate a new employee. He was desperate. The garage depended on contracts with Dr. Henry Caldwell's clinic. Losing that client would mean laying off staff, cutting wages, maybe even closing down. Why did Richard make this public bet? Tyler asked. If he's so worried about the situation, why create more pressure? Walter looked around to make sure no one was listening. Because he's convinced this truck can't be fixed, at least not in the conventional way. Richard thinks there's something fundamentally wrong with the vehicle, something that goes beyond our technical understanding. Do you agree with him? Walter fell silent for a long moment, staring at the engine as if it were an impossible puzzle to solve. I've been in this profession for 43 years, he finally said. I've seen every kind of problem you can imagine. Engines catching fire for no apparent reason, cars that only worked for certain people, trucks that develop different issues every week. But I've never seen anything like this truck. What makes it so different? The inconsistency. With normal problems, you always find some clue, some pattern. Even when the diagnosis is difficult, there's logic behind it. Here, there isn't. It's as if the truck worked perfectly until it decided not to work anymore. Tyler leaned over the engine again, this time observing more carefully. There was something Walter had said that bothered him. Loose bolts here and there, oxidized connections, dried-out rubber parts. Individually, none of these would cause the described problem, but if there was some correlation between these small failures... Walter, do you have the detailed reports from each repair attempt? Of course. Sharon keeps everything filed. Why? I want to study exactly what each mechanic did and when the problem reappeared. Maybe there's some pattern that went unnoticed. Walter smiled for the first time since the conversation began. You know what, kid? You might not be able to fix this truck, but at least you're approaching the problem the right way. Come on, I'll take you to the files. The rest of the afternoon was spent in the small administration room, where Sharon kept decades of garage documents. Tyler was surprised by the woman's meticulous organization. Every service performed was documented with impressive detail. Here are all the reports for Dr. Henry Caldwell's truck, Sharon said, placing a thick folder on the table. From the first maintenance to the last repair attempt. Tyler opened the folder and began flipping through the documents. The first report showed simple, routine maintenance. Oil changes, filters, minor adjustments. Nothing special. The truck behaved like any other well-maintained vehicle. The first hint of trouble appeared a year and a half ago. A brief report mentioned the engine had momentarily failed during a routine test, but returned to normal when the mechanic tried to reproduce the problem. Look at this. Tyler showed the document to Sharon. How long has Richard been working as manager here? It'll be 15 years in September. Why? Who was the manager before him? Sharon hesitated, as if the question brought back uncomfortable memories. Richard himself. I mean, he was always manager, but before he also worked as a mechanic. He was promoted to full-time manager about 5 years ago when business picked up a lot. Tyler continued examining the reports. There was something strange about the timeline of events. The first problem with the truck had been recorded exactly 2 weeks after Richard stopped working directly with vehicles and dedicated himself solely to administrative functions. Sharon, do you remember if Richard ever worked on this specific truck when he was still a mechanic? The question caused a visible change in Sharon's expression. She looked nervously toward the door, as if afraid of being overheard. Why do you want to know that? Just professional curiosity. I'm trying to understand the vehicle's complete history. Sharon leaned closer and lowered her voice. There was an incident a few years back. Nothing serious, mind you. But Richard was very shaken up at the time. What kind of incident? Dr. Henry had brought the truck in for routine maintenance. Everything was normal, just preventive parts replacement. Richard used to personally handle all the important clients' vehicles. Sharon paused, as if organizing her memories. The day the truck was delivered, just a few hours later, Dr. Henry Caldwell called in a panic. The brakes had failed on a mountain descent when he was returning from a medical emergency. Luckily, he managed to stop the truck using the parking brake and downshifting, but it was a close call. Tyler felt a chill. Brake failure was one of the most dangerous situations a driver could face, especially on a downhill. Richard was desperate, Sharon continued. He came in on Saturday and Sunday to check what had happened. He discovered that one of the brake lines had a microscopic defect that had gone unnoticed during maintenance. Manufacturing defect? Apparently, yes. An internal crack that only showed up after the part was under normal operating pressure. The kind of thing no one could predict, but Richard blamed himself a lot. Tyler was starting to form a theory about what might be going on. If Richard had developed an obsession with that specific truck because of the previous incident, maybe he was unconsciously sabotaging his own repair attempts to avoid taking risks. Sharon, do you think Richard has access to the truck after hours? The question made the woman visibly uncomfortable. Tyler, I understand your curiosity, but I don't think you should. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, Tyler hurried to clarify. I'm just trying to understand if someone might have worked on the truck without proper documentation. Sometimes when we're too anxious to solve a problem, we end up making small adjustments that we don't properly record. Sharon seemed to accept the explanation. Well, Richard has the keys to the garage. Sometimes he comes in on Saturdays and Sundays, especially when there's some urgency. It's possible he worked on the truck outside normal hours. Tyler nodded and went back to examining the reports. Now that he knew what to look for, some patterns began to emerge. Whenever a mechanic declared the problem solved, there would be a period of 2 to 3 weeks before the problem reappeared, and in several cases there were small notes indicating that additional adjustments had been made after the final test. Who had made these additional adjustments, and why weren't they properly documented? Tyler spent the rest of the afternoon studying the documents and taking notes. When the workday ended and the other employees left, he remained in the garage determined to begin his own investigation of the truck. The evening was cool and quiet. Tyler turned on the yard lights and positioned a flashlight over the truck's engine. He would start with a complete visual inspection, documenting every detail that could be relevant. While examining the electrical system, he heard the sound of a key in the main entrance lock. Tyler checked his watch. It was almost 10 at night. Who would be arriving at that hour? Richard appeared at the yard door wearing casual clothes and carrying a toolbox. When he saw Tyler working on the truck, he stopped abruptly. "What are you doing here?" Richard asked with a tone mixing surprise and irritation. "Working on the truck. You said I could work whenever I wanted." Richard approached slowly, as if assessing the situation. "I didn't expect you to start on the very first day, or that you'd stay so late." "I only have a week. I can't waste time." Richard observed the tools Tyler had arranged around the truck. Everything was meticulously organized. Each removed part was labeled and positioned in the order it would be reinstalled. "You're very organized," Richard commented. "I've learned that organization is essential when working with complex systems. A bolt in the wrong place can cause serious problems." Richard stayed silent for a moment, watching Tyler work. There was something in the older man's expression that the younger one couldn't decipher. It wasn't just hostility. There was a deeper tension, as if Richard was struggling with something internal. "Tyler," Richard finally said, "can I ask you a question?" "Sure." "Why did you accept this challenge? Any sensible person would have refused. 5 experienced mechanics have already failed. The chances of success are practically zero." Tyler stopped working and turned to face Richard. "Because I need this job, and because I believe every problem has a solution, even when it's not obvious. And if you fail, your career could be over before it even begins. Who would want to hire a mechanic who failed a public challenge?" The question touched on a fear that Tyler had been trying to suppress since he accepted the bet, but there was something about how Richard phrased it that intrigued him. It almost seemed like a warning, as if the older man wanted him to give up. "Why are you asking me this? Wasn't it you who wanted to see me fail?" Richard averted his gaze, staring at the truck as if it were an old adversary. "Maybe I acted on impulse today. Maybe I was unfair to you." The admission surprised Tyler. It wasn't what he expected to hear from the man who had created that humiliating situation. "Richard, why did you really make this bet? It wasn't just out of arrogance or wanting to humiliate me. There was something else." Richard stayed silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a sadness that Tyler hadn't noticed before. "Because I'm afraid," Richard admitted. "Afraid that you'll succeed where I failed. Afraid that this will prove I'm becoming obsolete, that I'm no longer fit for this profession." Tyler completely stopped working and focused on the conversation. It was the first time he had seen Richard show vulnerability. "Did you also try to fix this truck?" "Not officially, but during the nights, on weekends, I spent months trying to figure out what was wrong, because it was my fault." "Your fault? Why?" Richard approached the truck and placed his hand on the hood, as if it were a wounded animal. "Because I had worked on this truck before, years ago, and I made a mistake that almost cost lives. Since then, I've been trying to find a way to make up for that mistake." Tyler was beginning to understand the emotional complexity of the situation. It wasn't just a mechanical problem. Richard carried trauma related to that specific vehicle. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Richard hesitated, but then sat on a workbench near the truck. Tyler did the same, sensing they were about to have a conversation that would change everything. "It was my 3rd year as manager," Richard began. "I still insisted on working personally on the vehicles of the most important clients. I thought it showed commitment and quality." Richard paused, organizing the painful memories. "Dr. Henry brought the truck in for a complete preventive maintenance. Brakes, suspension, electrical system, everything. It was for a long trip he was taking to a medical conference in another state." Tyler listened in silence, realizing Richard was reliving a traumatic moment. "I supervised all the work myself, checked every detail, tested every system. The truck left here working perfectly. I was absolutely certain everything was in order. But something went wrong? On the return trip, Dr. Henry was transporting a little 8-year-old girl who had been in an accident. The girl needed emergency surgery in New York, and the local hospital didn't have the necessary resources. It was a race against time." Tyler felt his stomach tighten, anticipating what was coming next. "On the descent of the Blue Ridge Mountains, the brake system failed completely. Dr. Henry managed to control the truck using the handbrake and lower gears, but it was a close call. If it had been a few yards ahead, where the slope gets steeper—" Richard couldn't finish the sentence. Tyler could imagine the rest. "Did the little girl survive?" "She survived, but she arrived at the hospital an hour and a half late. An hour and a half that could have been fatal. The doctor said if she had arrived 15 minutes later, there would have been nothing they could do." Tyler now understood the source of Richard's tension. The man carried the guilt of nearly causing the loss of a child's life due to a professional mistake. "Did you find out what caused the failure?" "A microscopic defect in one of the brake lines, an internal crack that only showed up after several days of heavy use. It was the kind of thing impossible to detect during a normal inspection." "So it wasn't your fault. It was a factory defect." Richard shook his head vigorously. "It doesn't matter. It was my responsibility to make sure that vehicle was safe. A child almost lost her life because I failed to detect a problem." Tyler was beginning to understand why Richard was being so hostile toward him. The manager wasn't trying to humiliate a new employee. He was projecting his own guilt and frustration onto anyone who dared to try and fix that truck. "Richard, you said you've been trying to repair this truck in your free time. What exactly have you been doing?" Richard hesitated before answering. Well, whenever a mechanic declares the problem fixed, I come here at night and do a full check. I look for anything that might have been overlooked." "And do you find problems?" "Sometimes, small things. Connections that could be tighter, filters that could be replaced, adjustments that could be more precise." Tyler was starting to form a theory about what was really happening with the truck. "Richard, when you make these adjustments, do you document them?" "Not always. They're small changes, finishing details." Tyler stood up and walked around the truck, observing it with new eyes. The theory he was forming was disturbing, but it would explain many of the inconsistencies he had noticed. "Richard, is it possible that you're unconsciously sabotaging the repairs?" The question provoked an immediate reaction from Richard, who stood up abruptly. "What do you mean, sabotaging? I would never do something like that intentionally." "Not intentionally, but subconsciously perhaps. You're so traumatized by the previous incident that you might be creating new problems without realizing it, as a way to avoid taking responsibility for declaring the truck safe." Richard fell silent, processing the accusation. Tyler could see the internal conflict unfolding on the older man's face. Is that possible?" Richard asked with an uncertain voice. "It's a possibility. Trauma can make us act in ways we don't fully understand. You might be subconsciously creating small problems that ensure the truck is never declared completely safe." Richard sat down again, this time with his head in his hands. My God, if that's true. If I've been the problem all this time. Tyler approached and put a hand on the older man's shoulder. "Richard, if this theory is correct, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you're human. We all develop defense mechanisms when we go through trauma." Richard raised his head and looked at Tyler with an expression of relief mixed with shame. "What do you suggest we do?" "That we work together. You know this truck better than anyone. I have fresh eyes and don't carry the emotional baggage you do. Together, maybe we can find the solution." Richard stayed silent for a long moment, clearly wrestling with his own emotions. "Tyler, if we work together and manage to fix the truck, will you still accept my resignation?" "Your resignation? Why would you resign if we solve the problem?" "Because I made a public bet, said I'd resign if you managed to fix the truck." Tyler smiled, realizing the irony of the situation. "Richard, the bet was that you'd resign if I managed to fix the truck. If we work together, we will have fixed it. The bet doesn't apply." Richard considered the argument and also smiled for the first time since the conversation began. "You're smart, kid. Smarter than I thought. So what do you say? Should we team up?" Richard stood up and extended his hand to Tyler. "Let's fix this damn truck." The two men spent the rest of the night examining every inch of the vehicle. Richard shared everything he knew about the truck's history, while Tyler applied systematic diagnostic methods he'd learned in trade school. As they worked side by side, Tyler realized Richard was truly an exceptional mechanic. His experience and intuition were impressive. The problem wasn't lack of technical skill, but excess of emotional anxiety. Around 3 in the morning, they made a significant discovery. Tyler was examining the electronic injection system when he noticed something strange in the control unit. "Richard, look at this. Do you see anything odd in this unit?" Richard leaned over the engine and examined the device Tyler was pointing at. "Looks normal. What did you notice?" "This chip here. It's not in the original position. Someone removed and reinstalled it, but left marks on the contacts." Richard looked more closely and saw the tiny scratches Tyler had detected. "You're right. But who would do that? And why?" Tyler had a suspicion, but needed to investigate further before sharing it. "Richard, do you remember anyone else working on this truck besides the official mechanics?" Richard thought for a moment. "Well, Dr. Henry himself sometimes tinkers with his vehicles. He has basic mechanical knowledge and likes to understand how things work." "Is it possible he tampered with this unit?" "It's possible. But why would he do that? And why wouldn't he tell us?" Tyler was forming a theory, but it was so bizarre he hesitated to share it. "Richard, you said Dr. Henry threatened to cancel the contracts if the problem wasn't resolved. When exactly did he make that threat?" "About 2 weeks ago, right after my last failed attempt. And since then, has he shown impatience or irritation?" Richard stopped to consider the question. "Actually, no. Whenever he comes here, he's calm and friendly. He even asks about the repair progress with genuine curiosity, not like someone who's frustrated or in a hurry." Tyler was reaching a disturbing conclusion. "Richard, what if Dr. Henry doesn't want this truck to be fixed?" The suggestion left Richard visibly confused. Why wouldn't he want that? He's paying for the repair and needs the vehicle. Maybe he doesn't need the vehicle anymore. Maybe he's using this situation for some other purpose. Tyler began explaining his theory, even knowing it would sound like a conspiracy. Think about this. A respected doctor hires a garage to fix a truck. The garage repeatedly fails. The doctor has the perfect excuse to cancel all contracts without appearing unfair or arbitrary. But why would he want to cancel the contracts? We've always been fair with pricing and competent in our work. Maybe he found a more advantageous alternative, a bigger garage with lower prices, or some other kind of business arrangement. Canceling contracts with us without solid justification could damage his reputation. But if it's us who failed to fix a problem... Richard was processing the theory but still seemed skeptical. Tyler, that would mean Dr. Henry is deliberately sabotaging his own truck. That doesn't make sense. It makes sense if he no longer needs the truck. Maybe he renewed his fleet, and this specific vehicle became obsolete for him. Tyler pointed to the control unit. If someone removed this chip and reinstalled it incorrectly, it could cause exactly the kind of intermittent failure we're experiencing. The system would work normally most of the time, but fail at random moments. Richard looked at the chip with new understanding. If your theory is correct, how can we prove it? By reinstalling this chip correctly and testing the truck. If the problem disappears, we'll know someone intentionally sabotaged it. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The two men spent the next hour carefully reinstalling the chip and checking all the electronic system connections. Tyler documented every step of the process, photographing the incorrect positions before fixing them. By the time they finished, it was almost dawn. Richard turned the key and the truck's engine responded immediately, running with a smoothness it hadn't shown in months. "Looks like you might have fixed the problem," Richard said with a mixture of relief and admiration. "We still don't know if it's a permanent solution. We need to test the truck under real-world conditions." During the following days, Tyler and Richard exhaustively tested the truck. They drove it for hundreds of miles, subjected it to different load and temperature conditions, simulated mechanical stress situations. The vehicle performed perfectly in all tests. On Thursday, the day before the bet's deadline, Dr. Henry unexpectedly appeared at the garage. He was a man of about 50, dressed in understated elegance, and carrying himself with the natural authority of someone accustomed to being respected. "How's the progress with my truck?" he asked with a smile that seemed genuine. Richard and Tyler exchanged glances before answering. "Dr. Henry," said Tyler, "we believe the problem has been resolved. The truck has been working perfectly for 4 consecutive days." Dr. Henry's smile faltered almost imperceptibly, but he recovered quickly. "Excellent. What kind of problem did you find?" Tyler watched the doctor's reaction closely as he responded. It was a problem with the electronic injection system, specifically a chip that was positioned incorrectly in the control unit. This time, Dr. Henry's reaction was more visible. His eyebrows twitched slightly and he averted his gaze for a fraction of a second. "Ah, I see. And how did that happen?" Tyler decided to run a test. Someone had removed the chip and reinstalled it in the wrong position, probably by accident during some previous maintenance. "Very strange," commented Dr. Henry. "I don't recall anyone having worked on the electronic system recently." Tyler noticed the doctor hadn't categorically denied having tampered with the chip. He had carefully chosen his words. "Doctor," said Richard, "we'd like to do a final test with you present. Would it be possible to drive the truck for a few hours to be absolutely certain the problem's been resolved?" Dr. Henry hesitated visibly before answering. "Unfortunately, I can't today. I have a very tight schedule. But I trust your work. If you say it's fixed, then it must be." Tyler and Richard exchanged meaningful glances. Dr. Henry's behavior was confirming their suspicions. "Doctor," said Tyler, "there's something that made me curious. The problem always occurred during important transports at critical moments. That doesn't seem like a coincidence." The question made Dr. Henry visibly uncomfortable. "Well, these things happen at the most inconvenient times, don't they? It's Murphy's Law." "But the frequency was too high to be just bad luck," insisted Tyler. "It was as if someone knew exactly when the truck would be used for critical transport." Dr. Henry looked at his watch with exaggerated urgency. "Well, I need to go. When the truck's ready, call me. There's no rush." "No rush?" repeated Richard. Didn't you say you urgently needed the truck? Ah, yes, well, I managed to arrange a temporary replacement vehicle, so you can do all the tests you find necessary. After Dr. Henry left, Tyler and Richard looked at each other in silence for a moment. He's lying, Richard said finally. Completely. The question is, why? Tyler reflected on all the inconsistencies in the doctor's behavior. Richard, what if our initial theory is correct, but for different reasons? What if Dr. Henry really wants to cancel the contracts with us, but not for business reasons? What do you mean? What if he's planning to open his own garage or partner with another maintenance company? He needs justification to break off the relationship with us without damaging his own reputation. Richard considered the possibility. That would explain why he knows enough technical details to know where to tamper with the electronic system, and why he always knew exactly when to use the truck for critical transports. He created a situation where we look incompetent, giving him the perfect justification to seek other suppliers. Tyler walked around the truck, putting together the pieces of the mental puzzle. But now we have a problem. If we actually fix the truck, his plan failed. He might try to sabotage it again. So what do we do? Tyler smiled, forming a plan. Let's give him exactly what he wants. Richard looked confused. What do you mean? Let's pretend we couldn't fix the truck. Let him cancel the contracts, thinking his plan worked. Then we'll document everything and expose the truth. But that means you'll lose the bet. You'll be fired. Tyler shook his head. Not necessarily, remember? The bet was that you would quit if I managed to fix the truck. Technically, we already fixed it. The question is when and how to reveal it. Richard began to understand the plan. You want him to fully expose himself before we show we know the truth. Exactly, but we need solid evidence. We can't just accuse a respected community doctor without concrete proof. The two men spent the rest of the day planning how to document the sabotage. Tyler installed a discreet camera in the garage yard, positioned to capture anyone approaching the truck during the night. Richard was reluctant to participate in something that felt like spying, but Tyler convinced him it was necessary to protect the garage's reputation and the other employees. On Friday, the last day of the bet's deadline, they pretended they hadn't managed to solve the problem. Tyler carefully removed the chip from the control unit and reinstalled it in the wrong position, recreating the original issue. Richard publicly announced that the challenge had been a failure and that both would fulfill their parts of the bet. Tyler would be fired and Richard would resign. The news spread quickly through the garage. Some employees felt sorry for Tyler, while others expressed relief that Richard wasn't actually leaving the company. Around 2 in the afternoon, Dr. Henry Caldwell showed up at the garage. This time, his smile seemed genuinely pleased. I heard the problem wasn't fixed, he said, trying to sound disappointed. What a shame. You really did your best. Doctor, said Richard, given the circumstances, we understand if you want to look for another supplier for your vehicles. Well, replied Dr. Henry Caldwell, it's not something I want to do, but I have to think about my patient's safety. Maybe it's better to seek an alternative. We completely understand, said Tyler. You're absolutely right. Dr. Henry Caldwell seemed surprised by how easily they were accepting the end of their business relationship. Well, then I'll arrange to have the truck picked up. Don't worry about the payment for the services. Consider it compensation for the time you invested. Very generous of you, said Richard. After Dr. Henry Caldwell left, Tyler and Richard prepared for the final phase of their plan. They knew the doctor would probably return during the night to check if the truck really still had issues. Around 11 at night, the security camera caught a figure stealthily approaching the truck. It was Dr. Henry Caldwell, wearing dark clothes and carrying a small toolbox. Tyler and Richard, hidden in the garage, watched as the doctor opened the truck's hood and leaned over the engine. He seemed to know exactly where to look, heading straight for the electronic control unit. Using a small flashlight, Dr. Henry Caldwell removed the chip that Tyler had incorrectly reinstalled and examined it carefully. Then he reinstalled it in the correct position. Tyler and Richard exchanged confirming glances. Their suspicions were correct. Dr. Henry Caldwell started the engine and listened to it run smoothly. Satisfied, he turned off the truck and closed the hood. He was about to leave when Tyler and Richard emerged from the shadows. "Dr. Henry," said Tyler calmly, "could you explain what you're doing here?" The doctor jumped, clearly not expecting to be caught. Well, I was checking if you really couldn't fix my truck." "And what did you find?" asked Richard. Dr. Henry hesitated, realizing he had been caught in a trap. "The truck seems to be working now." "How interesting," said Tyler, "because just a few minutes ago when we tested it, it was still having issues. What could have changed?" Dr. Henry looked around, clearly searching for a way out of the situation. "Maybe the problem is intermittent. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't." Tyler pointed to the control unit. "Doctor, you just reinstalled a chip in the correct position." "A chip that was deliberately in the wrong position ever since the truck arrived here." The direct accusation left the doctor speechless for a moment. "I don't know what you're talking about." Richard stepped closer. "Dr. Henry, we have everything recorded. You sabotaged your own truck and then blamed us for incompetence." Realizing he had been completely exposed, Dr. Henry changed tactics. "All right, you've got me. Yes, I created the problem in the truck." "Why?" asked Tyler. The doctor sighed deeply before answering. "Because I needed a justification to break our contract without seeming unfair or arbitrary." "But why did you want to break the contract? We've always done good work for you." Dr. Henry Caldwell remained silent for a moment, clearly wrestling with the decision to reveal his true motives. "Because I'm going to open my own garage, I bought new equipment, hired experienced mechanics, secured a larger space, but I couldn't just abandon you overnight. That would damage my reputation in the community." Tyler nodded, finally understanding all aspects of the situation. "So you created a situation where it would appear that we were the ones who failed, giving you the perfect justification to look for alternatives." "Exactly, nothing personal, understand, it's just business." Richard was visibly irritated. "Dr. Henry, you made 5 competent mechanics feel incompetent. You made me question decades of professional experience. You nearly made a talented young man lose his job before even having the chance to prove his worth." The doctor seemed genuinely embarrassed. "You're right. I didn't think about the emotional consequences. I was focused only on the outcome I needed to achieve." Tyler reflected on the situation. Technically, they could report Dr. Henry for fraud or something similar, but that would result in a long and costly legal process, besides damaging the reputation of everyone involved. "Dr. Henry," said Tyler, "I'll make a proposal. We won't publicly expose what we discovered here, but you will compensate the garage for the months of wasted work and the emotional stress you caused." "What kind of compensation?" "You'll pay for a complete maintenance of all vehicles from your clinic, including the new ones you buy. This will generate enough work to compensate for the loss of the regular contracts." Richard seemed surprised by the generosity of the proposal. "Tyler, he doesn't deserve—" "Richard," interrupted Tyler, "we all make mistakes when we're under pressure. What matters is recognizing the mistakes and trying to correct them." Dr. Henry considered the proposal. "I accept, it's fair compensation." "And one last thing," added Tyler. "You'll write letters of recommendation for all the mechanics who worked on your truck, explaining that they are competent professionals and that any perceived failure was due to extraordinary circumstances." "I accept that too." The 3 men shook hands, sealing the agreement. It wasn't a complete victory for either side, but it was a fair resolution that allowed everyone to maintain their dignity. The following Monday, Tyler was officially reinstated to his position at the garage. Richard announced that the bet had been voided due to complex technical circumstances that were later clarified. The garage received payment for maintaining the entire clinic fleet, which represented the largest single contract in the company's history. Tyler was promoted to senior mechanic, and Richard received a special bonus for exceptional supervisory work. More important than the financial rewards, however, was the transformation in the relationship between Tyler and Richard. What had begun as antagonism turned into a partnership based on mutual respect and shared learning. Richard discovered that a young mechanic's experience didn't represent a threat to his own competence, but rather an opportunity for growth and renewal. Tyler learned that wisdom comes not only from technical knowledge, but also from the ability to navigate the emotional and political complexities of the workplace. Together, they developed a mentorship program at the garage, where experienced mechanics were paired with younger employees. The program not only improved the quality of work, but also created a more collaborative and less competitive environment. The red truck, once a symbol of frustration and failure, was completely overhauled and became the garage's demonstration vehicle. Tyler and Richard used it for client visits, showcasing the quality of work they could achieve when working as a united team. A few months later, Dr. Henry Caldwell did open his own garage, but found that managing a business was more complex than he had imagined. Eventually, he closed the garage and returned to focusing exclusively on medicine, maintaining a cordial relationship with St. Christopher's Garage. The experience taught everyone, involved valuable lessons about trust, communication, and the importance of approaching problems with an open mind and a generous heart. Tyler continued to grow professionally, eventually becoming a partner in the garage. Richard remained as manager, but now with a new appreciation for the value of intergenerational collaboration. The story of the Red Truck Challenge became a legend in the local community, told as an example of how apparent adversaries can become allies when facing challenges with honesty and mutual determination. Tyler never forgot the lessons learned during that intense week. When faced with complex problems in his career, he always remembered that the most effective solutions often come from combining technical knowledge with human understanding. Years later, when Tyler had his own young employees to train, he always told the story of the red truck as a lesson about the importance of looking beyond the apparent symptoms to find the true causes of problems. The garage prospered and expanded, eventually becoming the largest automotive maintenance company in the region, but the employees always remembered the core values learned during that transformative week: respect, collaboration, honesty, and the belief that every problem has a solution when faced with determination and teamwork. Richard, who had started that week afraid of losing relevance, discovered that his greatest legacy would not be the engines he fixed, but the young professionals he helped develop. Tyler, who had begun as an insecure novice, became a respected leader, not only for his technical competence, but for his ability to unite people in pursuit of common goals. The red truck continued to run perfectly for many years, serving as a constant reminder that even the most persistent problems can be solved when people work together with humility, determination, and mutual respect. The experience also transformed how the garage approached complex technical problems. Instead of assigning individual failures to specific mechanics, the team developed a collaborative system where difficult problems were tackled by work groups that combined different levels of experience and perspectives. This approach not only improved the success rate in problem solving, but also created an environment of continuous learning where mistakes were seen as opportunities for growth rather than reasons for shame or punishment. Tyler often reflected on how a situation that initially seemed destined for failure had turned into the most formative experience of his career. The extreme pressure of that week had forced both him and Richard to confront their own limitations and biases, resulting in personal and professional growth for both. The story also became a case study at the technical school where Tyler had studied, used to teach future mechanics about the importance of systematic investigation and collaboration in solving complex problems. Students learned not only diagnostic techniques, but also how to navigate the human dimensions of professional challenges. Richard, who once feared being replaced by a younger generation, discovered his most valuable role was as a mentor and guide. His experience and wisdom became even more valuable when combined with the energy and updated knowledge of younger mechanics. The transformation in the garage's dynamics attracted attention from other companies in the region. Several organizations visited St. Christopher's Garage to study their intergenerational collaboration model and mentorship program. Tyler and Richard were frequently invited to speak at conferences about professional development and team management. The garage's success also impacted the local community. Quality jobs were created, young professionals remained in the city instead of migrating to larger centers, and a model of excellence in automotive services was established. Sharon, who had observed the entire transformation from her position in administration, often commented that that week in March had marked the beginning of a new era for the company. The change was not only technical or organizational, but cultural and emotional. Walter, the veteran mechanic who initially tried to discourage Tyler, became one of the strongest advocates of the mentorship program. He often said he had learned more about his own profession in the months following the Red Truck incident than in previous decades of individual work. The experience also had profound personal effects on Tyler. He developed not only confidence in his technical abilities, but also in his capacity to lead and inspire others. The way he had handled the complex situation with Dr. Henry demonstrated emotional maturity that surprised even himself. For Richard, the episode represented a career renewal. Instead of feeling threatened by changes and the arrival of new professionals, he embraced his role as a facilitator of growth and development. His leadership became more inspiring and effective. The relationship between Tyler and Richard evolved into a genuine friendship. They often worked together on special projects and consulted each other on important decisions. The age and experience difference became an advantage rather than a source of tension. The garage implemented weekly meetings where all employees discussed challenging cases and shared knowledge. These sessions became opportunities not only for solving technical problems, but also for strengthening personal and professional bonds among the team. Customers began noticing the difference in service quality and the effectiveness of solutions offered. St. Christopher's Garage's reputation spread beyond Charlotte, attracting customers from neighboring towns and even other states. Tyler eventually pursued mechanical engineering in evening classes, with encouragement and financial support from the company. His graduation thesis was about collaborative automotive diagnostic systems, largely based on the experience lived at the garage. Richard also resumed his studies, taking management and leadership courses. He discovered that managing people was a skill that could be developed and refined, just like any technical competency. The company established a scholarship fund for employees who wanted to continue their education. Several mechanics took the opportunity to specialize in new automotive technologies, keeping the garage at the industry's forefront. The mentorship program expanded to include not only mechanics, but also administrative staff and customer service employees. The philosophy of collaborative learning permeated the entire organization. The story of the Red Truck also inspired other local businesses to rethink their own approaches to professional development and conflict management. An informal movement of best business practices began to form in the region. Tyler married a few years later to an engineer he met in college. Richard was the best man at the wedding, symbolizing the depth of the bond that had formed between the two men. In his speech during the ceremony, Richard mentioned how Tyler had not only fixed a truck, but had also fixed his own perspective on leadership and professional growth. The garage continued to thrive and expand. New branches were opened in neighboring towns, always following the collaborative model developed at the original location. Tyler took on the responsibility of training managers for these new units, spreading the philosophy learned during that transformative week. Richard became the regional director of the company, overseeing all units. His experience and wisdom were now recognized not only locally, but throughout the region. He often said that the best decision of his career had been making that seemingly impossible bet with a young, unknown mechanic. Dr. Henry, who had initially been the antagonist of the story, eventually reconciled completely with the garage. Years later, he admitted that the experience had taught him valuable lessons about business ethics and the importance of honesty in professional relationships. The garage specialized in solving complex cases that other companies couldn't resolve. Tyler and Richard developed systematic protocols for tackling persistent problems, always emphasizing the importance of considering human factors beyond purely technical aspects. Engineering and business students often visited the garage as part of their practical studies. Tyler and Richard became guest lecturers at several institutions, sharing their experiences on collaboration, problem-solving, and leadership. The cultural transformation of the garage attracted local media attention. Reports on the company's success highlighted not only financial growth, but also innovation in people management practices and professional development. Tyler published technical articles on collaborative automotive diagnostics in specialized magazines. His ideas influenced practices in garages across the country, setting new standards for the industry. Richard became a recognized speaker at conferences on leadership and management. His story of personal and professional transformation inspired managers from various fields to rethink their approaches to team development. The garage's mentorship program was documented and systematized, becoming a replicable model for other businesses. Specialized consulting firms approached Tyler and Richard to implement similar programs in various sectors. The company established partnerships with local technical schools, offering internships and apprenticeship programs that benefited both students and the organization. This created a virtuous cycle of talent development in the region. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're just getting started. Now, continuing. Years passed, and the garage that once faced the possibility of losing its biggest client had transformed into the benchmark company in its field. The growth was not just quantitative, but qualitative, based on solid values of cooperation, respect, and professional excellence. Tyler, now 35 years old, had become the majority partner of the company. His strategic vision and capacity for innovation had been fundamental to the sustained growth of the organization. But he never forgot his humble beginnings and always stayed close to employees at all levels. Richard, at 58 years old, remained active and influential, but had gradually transferred operational responsibilities to the younger generation. He focused on people development and long-term strategic planning, areas where his experience was most valuable. The company had diversified beyond traditional automotive maintenance, offering specialized services for electric and hybrid vehicles. Tyler had anticipated market trends and invested in training and equipment for new technologies. The original mentorship program had evolved into a complex professional development system that included job rotation, special projects, and educational partnerships. Employees were encouraged to develop multiple competencies and take on gradually increasing responsibilities. The organizational culture of the company became a subject of academic study. Researchers from universities regularly visited the garage to understand how it had been possible to create such a collaborative and productive environment in a traditionally hierarchical and competitive sector. Tyler was invited to join the advisory board of several regional business organizations. His perspective on sustainable business development and people management was highly valued by leaders from different sectors. Richard received official recognition from the Charlotte City government for his contribution to the city's economic development. The ceremony highlighted not only the business success, but also the positive social impact generated by the quality jobs created by the garage. The story of the red truck became a local legend, told and retold with small variations, but always preserving the central message about the power of collaboration and perseverance. New employees were introduced to the story as part of their onboarding to the company. The red truck itself, now over 20 years old, still functioned perfectly and was proudly displayed in the company's main showroom. An explanatory plaque told the story of how that vehicle had catalyzed a historic organizational transformation. Tyler became a mentor to several young entrepreneurs in the region, sharing not only technical knowledge but also insights about leadership, business ethics, and people development. His office was always open to those seeking guidance and advice. Richard wrote a book about his experience of personal and professional transformation. From Fear to Mentorship, A Journey of Discovery became popular reading among managers facing similar challenges of organizational and personal change. The company established a social responsibility program that offered free maintenance for vehicles of charitable organizations and families in financial difficulty. The program was operated entirely by volunteers from the company itself, further strengthening community ties. Tyler got married and had 2 children. He often took them to the garage on weekends, teaching them not only about mechanics, but about fundamental values of teamwork and respect for people. Richard became a grandfather figure to the children. The company implemented environmentally sustainable practices, including material recycling, use of renewable energy, and environmental awareness programs for employees and customers. Tyler Bennett viewed sustainability not just as corporate responsibility, but as an opportunity for innovation and competitive differentiation. Richard Henderson officially retired at 62, but continued as a consultant and mentor in the company. His experience and wisdom remained valuable resources for important strategic decisions and the development of new leaders. Richard's retirement ceremony was an emotional event that brought together hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by his work and leadership. Tyler gave a speech highlighting how that seemingly impossible bet had become the foundation of a thriving and ethically sound company. The company continued to grow and expand, always maintaining the core values learned during that transformative week in March. New challenges arose, including technological changes, competitive pressures, and economic volatility, but the solid foundation of collaboration and mutual respect allowed the organization to adapt and thrive. Tyler assumed the presidency of the Regional Business Association, using his position to promote ethical and sustainable business practices. He regularly organized workshops on leadership development and collaborative management for other business owners. The garage became a certified training center for several automotive brands, attracting technicians from across the region for specialized courses. This not only generated additional revenue, but also kept the team updated with the latest industry technologies and practices. Richard established an educational foundation that offered scholarships to young people interested in technical careers. The foundation also funded continuing education programs for established professionals who wanted to update their skills or specialize. The company developed strategic partnerships with equipment manufacturers and parts suppliers, creating an integrated service network that benefited all participants. These partnerships were based on the same principles of collaboration and mutual benefit that had been learned during the Red Truck episode. Tyler became an international speaker, sharing the story of the garage's transformation at conferences and universities around the world. His message about collaborative leadership and creative problem-solving resonated with audiences from diverse cultures and business backgrounds. The company implemented an exchange program with garages in other countries, allowing employees to gain international experience while sharing their own practices and knowledge. This enriched the organizational culture and brought new perspectives to local challenges. Richard became a consultant for small and medium-sized businesses facing crises or transition periods. His experience in turning conflicts into growth opportunities was especially valuable for organizations undergoing difficult changes. The garage established a research and development center focused on innovative solutions for complex automotive problems. The center collaborated with universities and other industry companies, continuing the tradition of a collaborative approach to problem solving. Tyler was elected to the Municipal Economic Development Board, where he worked to create policies supporting the growth of small and medium-sized businesses in the region. His practical experience in building a sustainable business informed his contributions to regional development. The company received several awards for excellence in customer service, sustainable environmental practices, and innovation in people management. Each recognition was celebrated with the entire team, reinforcing the culture of collective achievement. Richard published a second book, this time specifically focused on mentorship and leadership development. Building Bridges Between Generations became a reference text in business administration and organizational development courses. The story of the garage inspired the creation of a television program about business transformation that highlighted companies that had overcome significant challenges through innovation in people management and collaborative practices. Tyler established an international internship program that allowed young professionals from other countries to come work at the garage for set periods. The program created cross-cultural learning opportunities and strengthened the company's international reputation. The company developed proprietary software for managing auto repair shops that incorporated the principles of collaboration and continuous development learned over the years. The software was licensed to hundreds of other companies, generating additional revenue and spreading best practices. Richard became a visiting professor at a renowned business school, where he taught a course on transformational leadership in fast-changing environments. His classes always included the story of the Red Truck as a central case study. The garage implemented a 360-degree feedback system where employees at all levels received and provided regular evaluations about performance and development. The system emphasized continuous growth and improvement rather than punishment or competitive ranking. Tyler became involved in social responsibility projects that extended beyond the company, including technical education programs for at-risk youth. These programs offered both practical skills and guidance on professional and personal values. The company established an innovation lab where employees could dedicate time to developing creative ideas and experimenting with new technologies. Many improvements in the company's processes and services emerged from this innovation lab. Richard coordinated an oral history project that documented the experiences and lessons learned by veteran company employees. This historical archive became a valuable resource for training new employees and preserving organizational culture. The garage became a model for other family businesses seeking to professionalize their operations without losing the personal values that distinguished them. Tyler and Richard regularly consulted with these companies, helping them navigate complex transitions. Tyler received an honorary doctorate from a local university in recognition of his contributions to business development and management innovation. His acceptance thesis focused on the importance of combining technical competence with emotional and social intelligence. The company established partnerships with non-governmental organizations to offer technical training in underserved communities, creating employment opportunities and economic development in previously neglected areas. Richard created a weekly podcast about leadership and personal development that attracted listeners from across the United States and other English-speaking countries. Each episode included practical lessons based on real experiences and always emphasized values of collaboration and mutual growth. The garage implemented a succession program that identified and developed future leaders from within the organization. The program ensured continuity of the values and practices that had made the company successful, while allowing evolution and adaptation to market changes. Tyler became an angel investor, supporting startups that demonstrated potential to create positive social impact beyond financial success. He offered not only capital, but also mentorship based on his experience in building sustainable and ethically sound organizations. The company developed a wellness program for employees that included not only health benefits, but also support for personal development, continuing education, and work-life balance. The program reflected the understanding that happy and fulfilled employees were the foundation of business success. Richard established an annual award to recognize companies in the region that demonstrated excellence in collaborative practices and people development. The award became a prestigious recognition that encouraged other organizations to adopt similar practices. The story of the garage was adapted for theater by a local group, with performances highlighting themes of personal transformation, intergenerational collaboration, and overcoming adversity through teamwork. The presentations always ended with discussions about how to apply these lessons in different contexts. Tyler began writing a book on collaborative leadership based on his experiences, with special focus on how to create organizational cultures that promote both professional excellence and personal fulfillment. The book promised to be a practical guide for leaders in all fields. The garage became a professional pilgrimage destination for managers and entrepreneurs who wanted to study firsthand how it had been possible to create such a successful and ethically sound organization. Regular guided tours were organized to share knowledge and insights. Richard decided to fully document the mentoring methodology developed at the garage, creating a certification program that would allow other professionals to learn and apply the principles in their own organizations. The program combined theory and practice, always emphasizing the importance of human development. The company established an emergency fund to support employees and their families during personal crises, recognizing that financial and emotional security was fundamental to a productive and healthy work environment. The fund was financed by voluntary employee contributions and company profits. Tyler became a board member of several non-profit organizations, applying his experience in collaborative management to help these organizations achieve their social goals more effectively. He always emphasized that principles of good management were universal, regardless of sector. The garage implemented practices of radical transparency, sharing financial and strategic information with all employees. This transparency strengthened mutual trust and allowed the entire team to contribute to important strategic decisions. Richard created a reverse mentoring program where younger employees taught current technologies and perspectives to more experienced colleagues, while receiving guidance on professional skills and industry knowledge. The program formalized the two-way learning that had emerged naturally in the organization. The company became carbon neutral through a combination of sustainable practices and investments in environmental offset projects. Tyler saw sustainability as both a moral responsibility and a business leadership opportunity. Tyler was invited to join a government commission on the future of work, where he contributed insights about how to create work environments that promote both productivity and human fulfillment. His experience in collaborative management informed discussions about public policies on employment and economic development. The garage established a gradual retirement program that allowed veteran employees to progressively reduce their responsibilities while remaining involved as mentors and consultants. The program recognized that experience was a valuable asset that should be preserved and passed on. Richard Henderson published a series of academic articles on organizational transformation that were extensively cited by organizational development researchers and practitioners. His theoretical insights were always grounded in practical experience and measurable results. The company developed a mobile application that allowed customers to track the progress of their services in real time, communicate directly with technicians, and provide immediate feedback. The application reflected the company's commitment to transparency and open communication. Tyler Bennett established a scholarship program that covered not only educational costs, but also living expenses for students from low-income families who demonstrated interest in technical careers. The program recognized that financial barriers often prevented talented young people from developing their potential. The garage became a center of excellence in diagnosing complex automotive problems, attracting vehicles from across the country that other specialists couldn't repair. This specialization generated premium revenue while keeping the team constantly challenged and engaged. Richard coordinated a longitudinal research project on collaborative management practices that tracked the development of dozens of companies over several years. The results demonstrated clear correlations between collaborative practices and long-term sustainable success. The company implemented a shared ownership system that allowed long-term employees to become minor partners, aligning personal interests with organizational success. The system created incentives for retention, innovation, and commitment to company values. Tyler became a keynote speaker at an annual international conference on transformational leadership that attracted participants from around the world. His presentation on From Conflict to Collaboration, Lessons from a Red Truck, always received enthusiastic ovations. The garage established a cultural exchange program that brought young professionals from different countries for immersion periods in the American organizational culture, while sending employees for similar experiences abroad. The program enriched perspectives and strengthened intercultural competencies. Richard created a research institute focused on human development in workplace environments that collaborated with universities and business organizations to develop new approaches to people management. The institute became a reference in applied research on leadership and organizational development. The company received international certification as a Great Place to Work for 5 consecutive years, recognition that objectively validated the organizational culture that had been built over the years. The certification attracted both customers and talent, creating a virtuous cycle of growth. Tyler was chosen as Business Person of the Year by the State Industry Federation, recognition that highlighted not only financial success, but also contributions to regional social and economic development. He used the platform to promote responsible and sustainable business practices. The garage implemented an open innovation program that invited customers, suppliers, and even competitors to collaborate on developing solutions for industry challenges. The program generated valuable intellectual property while strengthening relationships throughout the business ecosystem. Richard established a university chair in collaborative management that offered courses and research on how to create organizations that balance operational effectiveness with human development. The chair attracted students and researchers from various disciplines interested in interdisciplinary approaches to management. The company developed a social impact measurement system that quantified not only financial results, but also benefits for employees, customers, community, and the environment. The system informed strategic decisions and communicated stakeholder value transparently. Tyler co-founded a network of companies committed to sustainable and socially responsible practices that shared resources, knowledge, and best practices. The network became an influential force for positive change in the regional business environment. The garage established a support program for employees who wanted to start their own businesses, offering mentorship, financial resources, and even initial customers for promising ventures. The program recognized that professional development sometimes meant growth beyond the current organization. Richard published a children's book based on the story of the red truck that taught children about teamwork, perseverance, and creative problem-solving. The book became popular in schools and libraries, spreading the lessons to a new generation. The company began hosting an annual innovation festival that celebrated creativity and collaboration in all its forms. The festival attracted artists, inventors, entrepreneurs, and academics who shared their passions and learned from each other in a festive and inspiring environment. Tyler received a prestigious scholarship to spend a year at an American university studying global trends in organizational management. He used the opportunity to research how collaborative practices manifested in different cultures and business contexts. The garage implemented a sustainability program that went beyond environmental practices to include social and economic sustainability. The program recognized that long-term success depended on balancing multiple dimensions of value and impact. Richard created a foundation that promoted social entrepreneurship, supporting projects that used business principles to address social problems. The foundation funded both startups and established organizations that demonstrated potential for scalable impact. The company established partnerships with universities to create executive education programs focused on collaborative leadership and sustainable management. The programs combined academic rigor with practical experience, preparing leaders to face the complex challenges of the 21st century. Tyler became an advisor to several multinational companies seeking to apply collaborative management principles on a global scale. His expertise in creating cohesive organizational cultures was especially valuable for companies with geographically dispersed operations. The garage developed a social franchise model that allowed entrepreneurs in other regions to create similar businesses using methodologies and values developed over the years. The model spread positive practices while maintaining local autonomy and cultural adaptation. Richard established an international award to recognize leaders who demonstrated excellence in transforming conflicts into growth opportunities. The award attracted candidates from around the world and highlighted inspiring examples of transformational leadership. The company implemented artificial intelligence to optimize operations, but always with a focus on enhancing human capabilities rather than replacing them. The approach reflected core values about the dignity of work and the importance of human development. Tyler was appointed UN Ambassador for Sustainable Entrepreneurship, a position that allowed him to promote responsible business practices on a global scale. He used the platform to advocate for policies that supported inclusive economic development and environmental sustainability. St. Christopher's Garage became a model for energy transition, implementing renewable sources, electric vehicles, and circular economy practices. The company demonstrated that it was possible to be both profitable and environmentally responsible. Richard Henderson published his memoirs in a book that intertwined personal history with lessons on leadership and organizational transformation. The book became a bestseller and was translated into several languages, inspiring leaders around the world. The company established a legacy program that ensured core values and practices would be preserved through future leadership transitions. The program included extensive documentation, governance systems, and feedback mechanisms to monitor adherence to central values. Tyler Bennett began working on a documentary about the garage's journey that would explore universal themes of transformation, collaboration, and human growth. The documentary promised to inspire audiences beyond the business world, showing how simple principles could create profound change. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this exciting journey of Tyler and Richard, and where you're following us from. If this story touched your heart, or made you reflect on collaboration and overcoming challenges, leave your sincere words in the comments. Do you believe they made the right decisions in turning conflict into partnership? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories.